Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to episode 29 of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Dr. Mike O'Connor. Dr. Mike O'Connor is the Headmaster of Dulwich College Suzhou. And Mike is an Australian from Brisbane, Queensland, like me. All of our listeners will now know all about Brisbane. I'm not yet officially sponsored by Tourism Queensland, but I'm pretty sure I will be at some point because I am always just telling people how amazing Brisbane is. But that's that's a point for another time, or maybe later today. So Mike joined Dulwich College Suzhou in China as headmaster in 2019 after 22 years teaching and leading in the Queensland Department of Education. He holds a Doctor of Education from Griffith University and a Bachelor of Education Secondary, with majors in English and History from the Queensland University of Technology. Mike's doctoral research focused on student attendance in Queensland secondary schools and has been published in a peer-reviewed journal. Prior to joining DCSZ, Mike led Upper Coomera State College on the Gold Coast. Upper Coomera is a preparatory year to year 12 college of 2,100 students. Before this, he was principal of 4 diverse schools in Queensland. Mike's professional interests revolve around explicit teaching and learning that facilitates student acquisition of thinking skills, the coherence required to lead schools to excellent performance, and how staff growth and professional development supports student happiness, wellness, and achievement. Mike also gains great satisfaction from supporting the development of aspirant leaders. Mike and his wife Terri love travel and are always planning their next adventure. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jono. I really appreciate being here with you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on. And before we chat even about your current context, you're a Brisbane, or born in Brisbane, that far back in terms of being based in Brisbane initially?
Actually born over the border, almost as far down as Victoria on the border in Albury, but
yes.
Came to Brisbane when I was 5. Did all my schooling in Brisbane. Brisbane's home.
Yeah, that's actually similar. My wife, Liz, was born in Dubbo and came up here. Her family came up here when she was 4. So similar sort of story. And then it always brings up the eternal question, which only Australians will care about, but I still, as a Queenslander, can't help but asking. So being born south of the border and then coming up when you're 5, do you follow the state of origin? Do you support anyone in the state of origin?
Yeah, look, it's not my chosen sport, soccer. So round ball football is my chosen sport, but I'm definitely a convert. I am maroon.
Yeah, okay.
So
right, that's the correct answer.
Definitely a Queenslander.
Yeah. I love saying that. People outside of Australia will have no idea, but it's such a great, like you said, not being your number one sport. Soccer also is actually my number one sport. I love soccer. I follow the Premier League in particular, but it's always great for people outside of Australia. If you're interested in Australian sport, the state of origin is a very interesting game of rugby league that happens a few times every year between just 2 of the states. It's got such a big rivalry. Okay, enough about Brisbane and sport. I feel like I tend to start like 1 out of every 3 podcasts with something related to geography or sport. Tell us about your current context, Mike. So what I guess Dulwich College Suzhou, but also what it's like to be headmaster. Give people a bit of a window into your context.
Yeah, thanks, Jono. It's really interesting, and I moved over there in 2019, as you said. Suzhou is a small Chinese city of 14 million people.
Wow!
It is located just to the west of Shanghai. So it's 27 minutes on the fast train into Shanghai, which is a city of nearly 30 million people. And China's just a fascinating place. Dulwich College Suzhou is part of the Dulwich family of schools. We have a parent college back in London, Dulwich College London, which has been around for just over 400 years.
Wow!
And we have colleges across Asia: Seoul, Singapore, Beijing, Shanghai, Suzhou, and then some other kinds of schools that are more relevant to the Chinese context. It's a 2-year-old to 18-year-old college, just under 1,000 students, 3 sub-schools. It's what most people in Queensland or Australia would refer to as a P to 12, except that we do enrol toddlers. So we enrol down to 2-year-olds in a kindergarten. So it's a little bit different in that context. Mm-hmm. My role is to oversee the educational and business functions of the college. Just similar to what an executive principal or what a leader of a large school or college in Australia would do.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a great explanation, and thank you for giving us a bit of context about Suzhou. I didn't realise its location compared to Shanghai and those numbers being I don't even know how many we have in Brisbane these days. It'd be under 5 million, or maybe 4 million. I think I'll do a quick Google and check while I'm here. But it's just staggering to think 14 million. And how large is the city for someone like me who doesn't know much really about the different cities in China? How large is Suzhou land-wise? Is it quite spread out? Is it really... I guess 14 million people is a lot of people to have in a city regardless, but is it a larger city in land size or smaller?
Yeah, it's quite spread out. So all of the Chinese cities are quite vast, and it's broken up into precincts or districts. Where the college is and where all of our staff live and where I live is in a part of the city called the Suzhou Industrial Park, and it's a purpose-built master plan community that's only about 30 years old.
Wow.
Whereas 30 minutes a little bit away is Suzhou Old Town. And in there we have a partner school that we work with, which is 990 years old. So, it's an unbelievable, it's an unbelievable mix of old and new. Suzhou, the city, is often referred to as the Venice of the East because it's a canal city.
Yes.
I think Venice of the East is a little bit generous. But it's a lovely place, very modern, lots of amenities, and really it's an easy place to live. Sometimes Asian cities can be quite challenging from, probably people who've travelled a bit, and also I know from some of my colleagues who work in the British schools across Asia, whereas a really modern, well-functioning, well-connected city like Suzhou is quite easy to adapt to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was way off with my population guess of Brisbane. It's 2.5 million. So I went
Really?
4 million.
Yeah.
I think I was.
Yeah. I couldn't help you. I had no idea. The other thing about the experience of Suzhou is that we were only allowed to enrol expatriate children. So all of the children in the college must be foreign passport holders.
Oh wow!
So we have about 50 different nationalities. The largest groups are what we call, I guess, Chinese heritage students. So they might have an American passport, they've got a Chinese mother, American father, or vice versa.
Yes.
And we also have a large Korean population because there's a very large Korean industry in the city.
Oh, wow, okay.
So there's strong links between China and Korea and industry. So we've got nearly 400 Korean students.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So a lot of Korean students in the college. Amazing. And so tell us, Mike, about your story, I guess, particularly those moments that really shaped you to become the leader who you are today.
Yeah, John. So I think I had a fairly normal upbringing in Brisbane. Two parents who loved me, an older brother, lots of sport, state school at Sunnybank Hills, and then McGregor State High School. So very proud of going through those channels, and then settled on an education degree. And once I went into that, I did the usual country service route. And ended up in central Queensland. But then I was fortunate enough to, as a secondary English and history teacher, end up in a Peter 12 school up in North Queensland. And I got the opportunity to teach primary school there after I'd been teaching the English. And the principal there, a wonderful gentleman, who I still have a lot of time for, encouraged me to go and look at a leadership position. So I applied for the classic one teacher school and ended up down in southwest Queensland teaching in a one teacher school. And then from there I just worked my way, like I said, a fairly traditional pathway through that process of deputy principal and then to principal. The only difference, I guess, is that I spent quite a bit of time in primary schools and quite a bit of time in secondary schools before I ended up at Upper Coomera. So before I went to Upper Coomera, my career had been split pretty much half in primary schools and half in secondary schools. Which was really good for my understanding of education right from prep through to exit. Yeah, I'd say it's a fairly traditional career pathway, smaller school, larger school, work your way along. And then the itch to go overseas came, and I grabbed it.
Incredible. And I'm imagining that move to go and lead, in the one teacher school in Southwest Queensland. What was I guess what was the biggest learnings that you had in that season when you took your first leadership role in that one teacher school?
I remember that was in early 2001, and it's 20 plus years ago. And I
Mm.
remember that was back in the day when we only had a week's Easter holiday.
Yeah.
And I got the notification that I was going, and I'm sure it was on the Thursday before term one finished. And I had to start, 1,200 kilometres away from North Queensland down to Southwest Queensland on the following Monday or Tuesday, whatever day term two started. So it was a mad move down there. And it really was a jolt. A one
Mm.
teacher school is an incredibly challenging thing. It's the teaching principal is the face of the government in the community. You're immersed in your community. There's no hiding. The school residence is in the school. So you literally wake up every morning, get out of bed, walk across the oval to the school.
Wow.
There's no getting away from it. Create a really tight group of friends that are in the community. But in terms of learning, I think learning, how students learned from back in those days, it was only grade 1 to grade 7. There was no prep, and also grade 7s were still in primary schools.
Mm.
So learning that entire learning experience of students from grade 1 to 7 was a really interesting thing for me, and I think still holds me in good stead. But just understanding community, Jono, and knowing that parents are partners in the learning journey, and it's really important for them to connect with the school and to understand what's going on. And I still use some strategies from there even now in Suzhou in terms of transparent practices with parents and understanding that parents who are really invested and care about their children's education, which all do in their own way,
Mm.
they want to know what's going on. They feel like a connection to the school is really important to them. So that was important. But then I think back some of the things too, like teaching kids how to swim. It's just
Mm.
it was just now we'd have swimming coaches or we'd have PE teachers or someone doing it. But I had to go off and do the swimming certificate and learn to teach these kids how to swim, which was
Wow.
interesting.
Yeah.
The Yeah, it was just a really interesting time. It was a 50-kilometre round trip from the school to get milk from the local town. So, it was 25 k's into town, 25 k's out again. And where I was at Hannaford, it's only 350 kilometres west of Brisbane. It's not even that remote. It was just
Yeah.
immediately remote. But some of these places that our colleagues work in that are, 2,500 kilometres from Brisbane, they're just extraordinary places.
Yeah, that is extraordinary. I remember chatting with someone from a school on the Sunshine Coast recently, and they were talking about a trip they did with students up north. To sort of must have been maybe near Cape York or more further inland. And I was telling someone this. I was telling someone this story the other day to explain how big Queensland is, saying that they took this busload of kids, and it took them the best part of 3 days to actually on a bus because some of the roads, are sort of the sort of back roads, so you can't necessarily go that fast on them. So it actually took them 3 days to get all the way to where they were going, and then when they were coming back, 3 days back, and they were stayed in the one state the whole time. So yeah, the
No, no.
distance and how remote different communities are here is incredible.
Oh, it's just Queensland's such a big place, and I don't think people can comprehend it, if they're not familiar with it. It's just enormous. I had colleagues who, when I taught, they would move to Thursday Island or they would move to one of the islands, even further away, closer towards Papua New Guinea. It's a long way away.
Yeah, absolutely. And just shifting from that to current situation, the importance of community, which you really learnt by just, boom, you're immersed in the community, one teacher school, nowhere to hide. How have you found building and developing and navigating community through COVID over, in your, in this season?
Yeah, I mean this pandemic has been extraordinary, and I don't think anyone fully understands just what the ramifications for students and families might be. I have a really clear theory that when it's over, we're probably going to see people experience some symptoms that I don't think could be described as anything other than grief. I really think that people are going to come out of this with a really challenging set of emotional problems to work through. So an international school is the heart of the community, just like a rural school in Queensland. So in terms of navigating that, it was about understanding that that's the connection that people have, with their other expat people, So our families lean on each other. They're very close to each other. They all and they do gravitate towards their own cultural groups, or the people obviously that have similar interests to them. But on the whole, most of them are having a very similar experience. They're a long way from home. So for us, it was about trying to create, and when I say us, a leadership team, trying to create opportunities for people to connect, trying to put a smile on people's faces. So we did a lot of events when we could, because a lot of the time we were isolated and we couldn't have people in the college or hold events. But just trying to give people an outlet to connect, trying to take the pressure off our kids too. Our kids are incredibly high achieving. They're all very focused on their results and their college destination. So trying to take the pressure off them when we could see that they were fraying at the seams a little bit. Because we've got kids who haven't seen their grandparents for 2 years, kids who have may have a parent overseas, or a sibling who's already gone off to college overseas who hasn't been able to come back. Just all of those challenging things, just trying to get people to connect, trying to get people to have the opportunity to have a smile on their face, Jono, because it's just been a pretty miserable time, I'd say, is the best way to describe it.
Absolutely.
And China being China was it's been inaccessible for most of the last 18 months, which is people have found challenging.
Yeah, it's I agree with what you said about it in terms of there being unique sort of consequences that we and people experiencing immense grief after COVID. I think it's I've definitely been watching educators and really felt like there's been a lot of people have had their lives, industries, people have lost their lives, industries have been completely disrupted or shut down. But I think education has been hit particularly hard because of the pressure on educators to continue as frontline workers, to keep educating and shifting online and doing online and face to face. And then I've just been working with and watching a lot of educators, and really, it's already. I believe it's already an incredibly meaningful, but very. I think it's a challenging industry, and great teachers. They work so hard. So, how have you navigated leading educators through COVID in terms of your staff?
Yeah, and again, that we have a just over 100 expat staff who, for the most part, haven't been able to do what they love to do. And one of the big attractions to international education is the opportunities it presents to travel. So the vast majority of our staff are British, and they've come to China to work in a great school, but also to have a cultural experience. Korea's an hour and a half away. All the other wonderful cities and countries of Asia are on our doorstep, and they haven't been able to do that. So there's been a great deal of I guess just caring for people and showing them that we understand, and walking the journey with them. So our leadership team have been really conscious of making sure that people understand that we're in it with them, and any opportunity we could, taking away, it gave us a chance to have a look at some of the unnecessary layers of bureaucracy that we may have not recognised prior. So different reporting mechanisms. Did that form really need to be filled out, or could we have found a better way to do it? as many social opportunities as we could. And then we also, we're a business as well as an educational facility. We took the opportunity to give some people some extra bonuses, some higher rates of pay, some stipends to thank them for their commitment. And that's just something that's not possible in a state education setting with awards and structures.
Yes.
So yeah, we were able to reward them financially as well, which was well received. But yeah, it's been challenging because I've got one staff member who hasn't seen his wife in 18 months because she lives in a country that isn't visa friendly to China at the moment.
Wow.
They're tough situations for people to deal with.
Yeah, that's wow. That's incredibly difficult. If we rewind a few years, speaking of, I guess, sort of tragedy and really difficult circumstances, you were principal of Maple Park State High School when there was the Slacks Creek fire in 2011. Can you tell us about, I guess, what happened there, and particularly what it was? I guess as a leader, I can imagine there's those moments where you just, I've heard leaders talk about it before, where you go through something and your community goes through something that's so heartbreaking, but as a leader, you need to manage that personal challenge, grief, but also lead your school and your community through that. So I'd love to hear you tell a little bit of that story.
Yeah, I mean that's the single most difficult thing I've ever done in my career, John. That was just, and I wasn't even a victim of it. So those two families that suffered that tragedy, you just can't possibly imagine how they still get on with things, but they do. And that's a real credit to them. So that's actually 10 years ago in August this year.
Oh wow! Yeah,
which is just seems extraordinary. We that was the worst domestic house fire in Australia's history. We lost 11 members of our community from across the state school and also the state high school where I was the principal, and it was just in terms of learning and what could you possibly take away from something that's just so horrific. Again, it was that sense of community. It was a really strong sense of letting the kids grieve and work through their own feelings in the way that suited them. I think that was really important. There was I distinctly recall saying to the kids, we're talking to the whole school, that I was going to be absolutely honest with them, tell them the truth, and not try to shield them from the facts. When we learned that, one of their peers had been identified, for example, as being a victim, to be honest with them about that and to, be upfront so that they could then commence their grieving process and we could support them rather than to try to, tell them half a story or shield them from it, because that wasn't going to be productive. But then also there was a real pragmatic need to get the school back on track and to get a level of normalcy returned, which was really challenging, but we tried to do quite quickly because we wanted to be on the one running parallel tracks, I guess, Jono, running parallel tracks of support and care and empathy and grief counselling for kids, but also trying to give them that structure and consistency that we knew that they needed. And then finally, just the strength of team. There's still team members that I had there, deputies and heads of department, who are the sort of people that I'll walk on glass for the rest of my career and life, because they were there, working with me and supporting those kids in that community, and that was really important, because it wasn't it wasn't a pleasant time. But I just think of those. I think of the families, that are just, still, still damaged, of course, because it's just the worst thing you can possibly imagine happening.
Yeah, it's unthinkable tragedy. It's I guess for leaders out there who, like me, can't imagine. I just cannot imagine. Um, no, obviously, it's so unfathomable for the families and for the community. And as a leader, I can't imagine that moment when you hear that news. Or I guess for leaders who are listening who haven't been through that, thankfully, but we know that these things happen in life, can happen. What advice would you give to leaders to, I guess, prepare is the wrong word, but I guess if something like that happens in their community, or there's a tragedy in their context, whatever that looks like, what advice would you give to leaders about how to navigate that and lead well through that?
I think unfortunately, there are some really practical learnings that do come from these things.
Yeah,
So yeah, like, not happy to have had to learn it this way, but happy to share those learnings.
sure.
One is that we should all regularly check our critical incident plan. It's a really important part of what we do, because no matter how experienced or tough or resilient we are, when you're faced with that level of challenge, you don't remember every little thing. But if you can pull out the critical incident plan and it's got some really good logical steps in there, you can
Yeah.
actually start to follow the manual, and the manual is really, really helpful. And one of the things is to assign roles to team members, so that people have specific roles, and their job is maybe just to liaise with the media. That may be one person's role.
Yeah.
In a situation like that, that's usually going to be the principal. But another one really important role is to assign a recorder, so that someone is recording incidents and recording communication and recording, important facts as you go along. And if that's just one person's job, then that's all they have to worry about. And those sort of practical things, I think, are really worth doing. We leaned heavily at DCSZ on our critical incident manual through the pandemic, because we took it down off the shelf, we dusted it off,
Yeah.
and we've reviewed it and we've refined it as we've gone through and learned things. I think it's a really important thing. The other thing is to be kind to oneself, and to give yourself some space and time. Like,
Yes.
sometimes people think that after a tragedy everything has to be done immediately, and the sad reality of the situation is that you can't go back in time and you can't change it. So whether you sit and give yourself 10 minutes to actually gather your thoughts and to calm yourself isn't going to matter in the big picture of things, because unfortunately the horrible thing's already occurred. It's not likely to occur again.
Yeah.
So, taking the time to gather one's thoughts, calm oneself, I think is really important, because, again, unfortunately, what the community wants, and not unfortunately, well, yeah, unfortunately, but also fortunately, the community wants the leader standing there and looking composed. The community wants the
Yes.
leader. They're the one that people look to for trust and confidence, and the next steps. So trying to find a way to compose oneself, I think, is critical.
Yeah, I don't think it gets much more challenging than than leading through a situation like that. And I appreciate you sharing. I think there's some wonderful thoughts in there that leaders, those listening who may not have dusted off that critical incident, process and form. I think there'll be some people maybe putting that on the to-do list to do this week, because it's so important, and it's worth finding the time to do it, so that I think that's just wonderful advice. The last thing you want to be doing is having to really think on your feet about all the boxes you need to tick. When that happens, you want to have some sort of checklist, something where you go, we've thought about this when time wasn't on, when the media weren't knocking at the door, and we
Mhm.
thought about this and what was important. So that's wonderful advice, Mike.
Yeah, no one can think of everything on the time. It's number one, people are unlikely to have had that experience before, and let's hope that no one has to do, a suicide experience, or a staff death experience multiple times. In
Yeah,
most people's careers, you would hope that ththese are one-offs, or at the most maybe twice.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
being an expert on it is not a badge of honour people really want to wear.
No, yeah, that's true. I want to ask you about mentoring because I know you're very passionate about mentoring, and it would be great to hear who's a mentor of yours that comes to mind, and why. Why do you think they had such an impact on you?
Yeah, so I always go back to my deputy principal colleague, and I won't mention her name because she literally will kill me. And I mean literally.
Yeah.
She is she's one of the greatest friends I've got, on the planet, but also in education, and is one of those people that I just was able to work alongside and learn from, just by watching the way she conducted herself and the things that were important to her. And I think that was a real privilege for me because I'd come out of my one teacher school and ended up, as a deputy, in my late 20s in a large primary school.
Yeah.
And I needed that guidance. I needed someone to show me the ropes around what was important around curriculum and how did you navigate relationships, and how did you handle parents who were possibly more challenging, or had a different set of perspectives to what I was used to in my previous schools. And and what that relationship did for me was it encouraged me that when I became a principal and had my own deputies, I wanted to support them and mentor them and develop them to be the best that they can be. So what does that mean? So what that looks like in practice is I've tried to always engage in what I call a coaching model that shows people. If you think of, you used a sporting analogy at the start, and I think sometimes we should be careful with sporting analogies because they can often alienate, groups of people in the room who aren't necessarily interested in sport, but they're
Yeah.
popular and, they're often very relevant. But a good coach of any team sport will actually blow the whistle and get out on the court or the field or whatever it is and try to show their players what it is they should be doing,
Mm.
whether it be where they should stand or how they should receive the ball or, whatever they should do. So, I think that leadership can be the same, so some principals don't like to coach their deputies and their people on things like finance and school operations. Or I try to bring my people in close and explain to them, well, this is how the budget works. This is how the budget planning works. This is why we have spent money in this area this way, and this is why we have done this project this way. And I think that's been appreciated. I'm really proud. I've got a whole bunch of ex-deputies out there around Queensland with their own schools now. I hope that they're not there in spite of me. I hope they're there because I've somehow supported their development by showing them, how to have a conversation with someone, how to strategically plan a cycle of improvement, things like that I think are important. And I used to have this boss on the Gold Coast who was a regional director, and he used to say, if you've got 100 of something, Mike, and you give someone 20 of it, you show someone 20% of your 100. That doesn't mean you've got 80 and they've got 20. That means between you now you've got 120. Does that make sense?
Mm.
And I think that was a really good way of saying, if we give parts of our learnings away, we're not giving anything away from ourselves. We're just helping someone else, and that's been a really important part of my leadership.
Yeah, that's a really great way to unpack that. That when if you have 100 and you give 20, it doesn't become 80-20, it becomes 120, and yeah, it becomes, you increase to 120. And I think a lot of leaders do struggle to jump in and really help and give because there can be this element of feeling threatened or being afraid of, and I just think you've hit the nail on the head that it's just not worth thinking like that. At the end of the day, everyone wins when you invest in the people around you, and I think we've got to think bigger picture than just our organisation. I love what you said about Ed Queensland, how you have these people that you've invested in when you were working with them, but now they're in they're running schools in Queensland, and they'll be doing the same thing, and that's the big picture. And that's what leadership is about, and that's why mentoring is so important.
Yeah, I just think, John, it's critical, and I think it's our job. I think it is absolutely part of our job. Another way that I'd put it would be, that it's really important for principals to show deputies and aspiring heads of department or teachers who want to go into leadership that the job's actually doable.
Yes.
If the principal is always frazzled and, works 14 hours a day and never looks like they've got a spare moment, then who's going to want to do the job? When the rest of us, pack it in and are going on to other things. And so, there has to be an element of us showing people that the job is, achievable and isn't going to, put you in an early grave. Because
yes,
I don't know of any other profession where people, speak negatively of their own job as much as sometimes teachers and principals do. And I think it's a real shame.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Well, this has been so great. One thing that we haven't had a chance to chat about much today, but I'd love to, potentially do a second episode down the track, or definitely there's an invitation for you to come back on another time, Mike, because I'd love to chat more about education and educational sort of philosophy. I think leaders need to be learners, and I love chatting with educators like yourself who have committed so much of their lives to understanding learning and educating and education. So I could spend a couple of minutes on it now, but what I really want to do is dig deep and have a good chat about it another time, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Awesome. And did you have any final thoughts for listeners as we wrap up this episode?
Oh, I think that I do, yeah. So just during a really challenging time, and as we move towards Christmas with the end of the school year here in Australia, it's only halfway through my school year in China, mind you.
Yeah, true.
Because we run the other calendar. I think it's important that people really reset and recharge and enjoy Christmas break and try to get themselves ready, because I think people need to forgive themselves and remind themselves of just how challenging the last 2 years have been, and yeah, take a moment to reflect.
That's wonderful advice, and it's a great point to land on, because I think you're right. I think in 20 years, 30 years time, I think the next generation, in schools, those who haven't been born yet, I think they'll be saying, "What was it like?" And as they grow older, they'll say, "How on earth did you live through that?" And I think we'll go, "I don't know." I look back and I know we did. I know life went on and we made it work and we couldn't travel. But I think you're right. I think there's a hidden toll, and I think people definitely need to give themselves a lot of kindness and be aware that, okay, yeah, hopefully 1 in 100 year pandemic that we won't see again for a lifetime, and that's what I've been leading in the past couple of years, and that probably means I need to give myself a good break and be kind to myself, especially kind to myself this Christmas. That's wonderful advice. Well, thank you to our listeners. Really appreciate you tuning in. I know you would have gotten a lot from that today. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Mike. Reminder for our listeners that you can also check out a couple of other podcasts we have at Clarity. We have the John O. White Leadership Podcast, where I just give you content. I just recorded a new one today, which was really about this idea: are leaders born, or can they be made? Like, do you have to be a leaders only born leaders, or can they be made? So you'll have to listen to that if you want to hear my thoughts on that. That'll be published soon. And the leadership question of the day, where I ask you a different question every day to help you grow as a leader and challenge your thinking. But to land today's episode, I just want to thank once again, just a massive thank you for generosity of time. And also, I know we didn't mention this in the podcast, but in day 13 of quarantine, so being very kind to jump on and speak to us when on day 13, even though you've still been working day 13 of quarantine here in Brisbane, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've really enjoyed your thoughts. There's so much wisdom and some really appreciate you sharing some of those stories. They were really touching stories and really encouraging for leaders.
No worries, John. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Take care.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And you know, my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jono White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.